Okay, hello and welcome again to all of you that are on the call and to all of you that are watching this recording. I'm Sarah from the Center for Non-Dual Awareness, and I have with me here Lynn Marie Lumiere. She's a new member recently to the center. Our membership is all of you, basically. Our big community is and all the awakening consciousness human beings on the planet. And we currently have membership for those that are sharing non-dual awareness with others in many, many different kinds of ways. We support them and their work, and we support anyone sharing from this place of awakened consciousness in their work in the world by creating peer support opportunities so that there's a lot of different community for the flowering of this as possible. So Lynn Marie is a seasoned psychotherapist with a focus on transforming issues at their source through dissolving the belief in separation that creates and sustains them. And actually, Maureen, I'm going to mute you for a second. Here we go. She's dedicated to the awakening of consciousness and meeting life's challenges as doorways to greater freedom. Her work is sourced in over 40 years of dedicated spiritual and psychological exploration, as well as almost 30 years of marriage and practicing psychotherapy. This experience led her to the understanding that no matter what the problem, transformation and freedom from suffering is possible when we tap into the infinite and ever-present source of love. She has been especially interested in applying this understanding to healing relationships and trauma. Lynn Marie has been involved in the exploration of non-dual wisdom and psychotherapy since it began in 1988. She's a repeat presenter at the annual Non-Dual Wisdom and Psychology Conference and the Science and Non-Duality Conference, and she's a contributing author to The Sacred Mirror. She is also the co-author with John Lumiere Wins of The Awakening West. Her primary spiritual teacher is Adyashanti, and she has studied with many other teachers from non-dual Buddhist and Hindu traditions. Currently, she lives in Grass Valley, and for more information, you can go to her website, which is in the email that was sent out. So her intention is to offer support for learning and experiencing awakened relating. So after all of this experience, Lynn, and I'll unmute you again, that you have had all in the awakening world and specifically applying it to trauma and to the psychological unfolding, there's now a focus on relationships, on intimate relationships, and this book has emerged. Do you want to talk a little bit about when you started to feel this focus and specific kind of clarities around applying it to a relationship, and how we were talking about this, how it's coming out of you is like this evolution from conscious relating to awakened relating?
Well, I think it's, first of all, probably the most important thing to say first off is that awakened consciousness can be applied to all of life. That it's the more we embody and live as or from our awakened consciousness, the better all of life is. It can be applied to relationships, to our work, anything that we do, anything that we are, our health, every aspect of life. But I chose, at least in this book, to focus on relationship because I felt that embodying our awakened consciousness in relationship, particularly close, intimate relationships, is probably our biggest challenge as human beings. So I'd like to explore that with all of you more, and I wanted to just explore that for myself and for everyone else. Like, how do we embody this that we are in intimate relationships? Because that's where we tend to get the most triggered. You know, that's what brings up that sense of separate identity the most, you know, where we get threatened in very deep places in our humanness, and how to bring the truth of being the source of love itself and being unified as human beings being the same source together, relating to each other, and the paradox of that. So, and I included working with relational trauma because I feel that that's one of the things that people are challenged with the most in close relationships, because that's what they bring up, is whatever relational trauma we have, mostly from our early life in our childhood.
Yeah.
We can heal that through a more awakened relating.
Yeah, that's I think that's been the juiciest topic for a long time for me, and lately in almost all the conversations I'm having is this particular early childhood development, nervous system attachment trauma that's so pre-verbal, it's so pre-verbal in a way. When, I mean, we're jumping right into like the juiciest part now. There's a question I'm about to ask you, to super jump in, but when this very these kind of pre-verbal attachment issues get triggered in these intimate relationships, especially one that involves sexuality, how is it that you're finding the moving through it, from, oh gosh, is that even a maybe just speak more to that kind of instant difference, because sometimes it's so easy when that pre-verbal trauma arises to bypass it by going to the awakened state, going to the awakened consciousness, and almost avoiding it. What is it like to meet that in the moment that it's getting triggered, especially in relationship and in ourselves? Such a different kind of trauma, feels like, for me.
Yes, and it's something that most human beings carry in varying degrees. None of us got really perfect bonding and attachment with our primary caretakers, or perfect parenting. That doesn't exist because we live in a world where everybody's living in duality, right? For the most part, we're just beginning to wake up to the non-dual truth of this existence. And so when we're born into duality and raised in duality, there's going to be wounding. That's just a part of how it is. And that wounding is a big part of what brings us to our truth. It helps us to explore, how can I get free of this pain? So that deeper attachment wounding that Sarah said is pre-verbal, it can be very, very early, in the first two years of life, but it can be triggered very strongly in intimate relationships. And I believe you said, how can we meet it fully? In my experience, it's not possible to meet something that is that charged in our human nervous system without some awakened consciousness. That we can experience it, but not fully allow it, not fully meet it. We can experience it, but often what happens is either some form of resisting it that can happen automatically, and even unconsciously, or some form of getting stuck in it and overwhelmed by it. But to be able to meet it in pure awakened consciousness, we need to have some awakened consciousness. And that's what gives us the capacity and the space within ourselves to do that. And sometimes if the wounding is very, very deep, we may also need some form of somatic trauma therapy to also build a capacity in our nervous system to be present with this kind of charged material. So it's a little bit of both, that we need the space of awakened consciousness, and sometimes we also need to build more of a capacity in our nervous system, because the more trauma we hold in our nervous system, the more diminished our capacity is to be present with what is in life. So there needs to be a healing of that happens both in the body, in human relationship, and with the greater beingness of we are, all three. I think everything is needed to bring that together and awaken from that kind of wounding.
Thank you so much for touching on that, the somatic piece. I think often it seems some teachings, spiritual teachings, will almost give a slight sort of like that's not needed, that somehow that's not, doesn't need to be part of any of this, or everything should be able to be fixed within inquiry or within working with the mind. And do you have any specific somatic, I know, for me, cranial sacral has been something that's really helped the nervous system. What is it that other things you can talk about the somatic level for the body and the repair of the nervous system?
Okay, I can talk about that. And first of all, I want to say that, like you said, so many teachings don't address this. And the spiritual teachers generally don't, because that's not really their job. Mm-hmm. So that's more of a job of what a non-dual psychotherapist, which is what I refer to as being a non-dual psychotherapist. So it can cover the territory of awakening as well as the territory of healing from our wounding and our humanness. Because the more the nervous system is healed and settled and quieted down and balanced from the kind of dysregulation that happens from life here on planet Earth, the more we can rest in our being. They work together. In my own personal experience, they've been inseparable. The healing of my own wounding and the awakening process has been completely inseparable. The more that I awaken, the more I can be present with the wounding, the more I'm present with the wounding and balance my nervous system, the more that I can rest with my awakened awareness. So they work together. And for me, I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner. So that is one way that we work with the nervous system that's available to us. It's relatively new that we actually know how to work with somatically with trauma, believe it or not. Throughout the history of psychology, they didn't really have much to offer. It was all insight oriented, more mental psychotherapy was. And it wasn't until the 90s that we started really learning about the brain and the nervous system and attachment wounding. That's really new to be exploring that and the effects of that on the human organism. So somatic experiencing is one of the better treatments that's available, working with the physiology of trauma and bringing the nervous system into more regulation, more capacity, more ability to be present in the here and now. We hear so much in the non-dual teachings, the essence of the teachings really boils down to being present with what is, right? Just allowing what is, being present in the moment with what is. And somatic experiencing is a method that helps us be more present with what is in our capacity in our nervous system. And there are other trauma methods that work with the nervous system, such as EMDR, which is geared more for working with charged material that's stuck in the nervous system and allowing it to move through. Because really what it's about is allowing experiences to move through. If we have positive experiences, if we have a really beautiful day, being in nature and on a lake and, with someone that we're so happy with, and we have this wonderful, beautiful day, those kinds of experiences never get stuck in our nervous system because we fully allow them, we fully experience them, so they don't get stuck. We never talk about, oh, I can't get rid of this positive experience, it just keeps coming back. But our painful experiences, especially our most painful, even to the degree of traumatic, they get stuck because we don't fully allow them, right? They are overwhelming, so they don't get fully allowed. They get stuck in the nervous system. And it's a lot of energy and stress in the nervous system that then turns into symptoms. It turns into either psychological symptoms such as depression and anxiety. Depression and anxiety is a nervous system arousal. It's either stuck on activation, stress arousal, which is anxiety, or a shutdown version of arousal, what looks like depression. And that's what that is. So it's about bringing the nervous system back into regulation. And if it doesn't manifest that way, it usually manifests as physical symptoms. It goes into the physiology and can become many different kinds of chronic physical symptoms, especially around digestive area or various kinds of, chronic pain or chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or allergies. There's many things like that that are sourced in this energy that's trapped in our system because we haven't been able to fully allow it. So how do we fully allow it? First of all, we need to bring more regulation into our system so we have a capacity to do that. Because when our system's on overwhelm, we can only allow a little bit. And I've worked with people who have very overwhelming amounts of trauma in their system that they can only take just homeopathic amounts of experience, even positive experience, without going into overwhelm. So we have to gently work with that system to increase its capacity. And this is the piece that the spiritual teachers don't bring in because they're not trained to bring that in. They generally say, be present with what is, which is true. It's accurate. That's what we need to do. But we need some help to be able to do that when we have a lot of charged experience in our system. And then there's, one of the best things we have now, the researchers are telling us one of the best things we have now to bring about the resilience, regulation, capacity in the system is neurofeedback. So that's a fantastic tool that we now have. We can put electrodes on the brain and read brain waves where they're imbalanced and bring that brain waves back into balance and regulation. And by doing that, oftentimes many symptoms fall away because the stress patterns that are holding them in place are relaxed and released. So those are some methods, that we have now to work with this. And we'll just go with that for now.
Yeah. I can imagine it's really healing for so many people to hear that are trying to be present with what is. And I notice a lot in my work lately, there is can be an extraordinary self-judgment and beating oneself up for I'm trying to be present with what is and I can't, as if they're doing something wrong. And
right.
Not being able to stop the mind or not being able to accept a difficult emotion kind of like immediately, like I should just be able to be okay with it, or even I should just be able to let it move through. So if the resistance to letting it move through, but there's a conceptual understanding, I have to be able to let it move through and I can't even do that, then there's, like this triple and quadruple self-judgment that gets piled on. So what I'm loving about what you're explaining and clarifying is too that like there are these systems, there are these particular methods and modalities that we cannot expect ourselves to be able to regulate our whole own nervous system alone. And so this is where it gets to it's a kind of relating where these methods you're describing involve working with someone else, working with another body, being touched by another person. The EMDR is someone else. There's a level where the nervous system and humanness seems to get regulated through contact with other humans in some way.
Yes, that's a very important point, because I think it can be fairly common in the spiritual circles that people believe that if you wake up, all of this will be resolved in some way. That kind of belief seems to persist, that that's going to take care of everything. But if there's a lot of dysregulation in our nervous system, the waking up alone does not do that. However, it makes it more possible to be with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so talk about that a little, yeah.
And so it's, we do need, what I've found in the decades that I've been working with this, with myself and with other people, that I touched upon earlier, is that we need the healing on a lot of different levels. We need it on the somatic level, which we've already discussed, and also the human relational level. So that if we tap into the infinite beingness, that is like the ground, the stable ground of all goodness and support and all safety that we need to tap into as well. But only that doesn't really get to our humanness, the wounding in our humanness. And especially if we come back to relational wounding, which is all wounding that happens in relationship to other people, which is most of it, unless you have a car accident or something that isn't so relational. It's mostly what's affecting us the most is the early wounding from our primary caretakers, and that's of course relational. So it needs a relational healing. It needs some element of that. Another nervous system, not just to be there, but ideally another nervous system that is regulated in itself. And we're all so connected, we're really one being, and there's really no separation. So that our nervous system, even if we're just sitting in the presence of someone who has a regulated nervous system, even if they're not awake, therapists who may have very regulated, balanced systems, there's a resonance, there's a co-regulation that happens that's nonverbal, just being together and connected in a way that's not energetic. And it brings the other person into more regulation, just sitting with that. So most of it isn't even verbal. It's just being together, ideally with one person, having their system balanced, and even more ideally, that other person has some awakened consciousness that they're resting in. And both of those things together just starts to pull the other person, into their balance and regulation. There's a transmission of sorts that happens through the humanness and through our greater beingness together. That is the healing of that.
So herein comes the the intimate romantic relationship partner part, right? So in my own experience, as I'm going through the healing of my own nervous system and my intimate relationships, man, because of that resonance, that it's so loud. My nervous system is, once I get more and more intimate, I'm tracking that person that I'm around. All of a sudden, my young nervous system, maybe that's not fully regulated yet, is going to start tracking my intimate partner and getting activated if it feels that if my partner does not have a very regulated nervous system and theirs gets activated or goes through a disruption, then mine does too.
Right.
Yeah. So what kind of go ahead.
You're right. So we can resonate. We come into that resonance of bringing us into more balance if one person is. But the reality of close relationships is oftentimes both people get
right.
And in the best of scenarios, one person is balanced that can help bring the other one in. But oftentimes both people are triggered, and then it requires some settling so that something else can happen. So what I call awakened relating is bringing some awakened consciousness in. And we'll get into that later about how do you do that. First of all, we have to have some sense of our awakeness, and then we need to turn to it. So that when these things get activated, it's a deep commitment. Awakened relating is a very deep commitment. That's more important to us to stay awake and to become more awake and embody that in our life than the relationship itself. That when things get activated, then what's most important is to come back to what's most true, to find a way to settle, and then a way to come back to what's most true to us in the moment. And if the other person's not doing it, fine, we do it. We're only really responsible for ourselves. But that's the first thing we do. And if everything's too charged, you go to different rooms and you settle. You do what you need to do to settle, or get other help, whatever is needed to come back to more regulation, and then eventually more sense of this deeper wisdom. So we are turning to that, not to just going with our reactivity or coming up with conditioned ideas in our mind. We're quieting down and we're going to something deeper and letting that inform what needs to happen in the moment in relationship.
Mm-hmm. And
that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I'm feeling, also I wanted to, we had a a speaker last year, I think, who mentioned that scientifically they're saying it takes 20 minutes for the brain, once it gets the nervous system and brain get re-stimulated in a trauma response, for it to quiet down. So that taking a break to settle and really giving it that time and coming back to that wisdom that can then inform us what changes maybe need to be made, or how to tend to this. Okay, this nervous system response is happening. What are practical, like this wisdom can inform us what to do practically in the relationship.
Right. Or if anything needs to be said.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, we just need to be with what got triggered in us.
Yeah.
And after that, maybe we can share what that is. And maybe something doesn't even need to be said.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about, healing what's being triggered and mirrored, inside of ourselves. And the best way to be with that, like you said, it takes time to settle. As you said, 20 minutes, I've heard 8. I don't know, but it takes some time. And it will, the more that we're able to really be fully present with it, the faster it will settle. We're leaving it alone. We're not in some resistance to it or some engagement in it. If we can just allow it. And the best way to allow it is some combination of resting in awakened awareness and resourcing ourselves, resourcing our physical system. And that can happen in many ways. Just feeling something in the body that feels okay, anything like tingling at the bottom of the feet or some warmth in our hands, or looking out the window at a beautiful tree, or seeing some flowers, or something we see in the environment or we feel in our body that is resourcing to the physical nervous system. Because it's all charged up in activation, it needs to know that there's something okay that's touching the physical system. And that helps us get more in touch with the deeper stillness inside that resides in the body, and then resting in the stillness. And just being with what's happening is like meeting that child part that maybe got abandoned or whatever, that just got triggered, and it's being met by that resourcing and by our awareness being brought to it. So it's not being further abandoned, it's being met in a depth of love that is very, very, very healing. And if we're fortunate enough to have a partner who's also totally committed to awakening and healing, then they're not charged up. That's the big if. Then they can help. The person who's most charged. Put a hand on their back, hold them. Be a resource for them.
Yeah, that was just coming up for me, that particular part around seems like kind of a nuanced territory of the level to which your partner is also doing this work. So they feel like there can be there can be an heavy-handed kind of, well, it's all on me no matter what's going on, even if they're not doing any of this work in themselves. It's all about me meeting myself and healing it myself. Is there a part in this territory where it is important that your partner is also in the process of this? Otherwise, it's not going to, there's just maybe more of a constant re-stimulation of the nervous system around a partner that's not also healing or can support you in yours. Kind of, again, just wanting to address these kind of moments of, I watch people beat themselves up because they can't do it in their relationship. And there's this idea that it's all about them always and only their responsibility always, which on one level, of course, is true. We're responsible for our own. Yeah.
Yes, that actually is true. But the beating oneself up, let's address that, because that does happen a lot. Is we get triggered in relationship, we get, and it can be really strong. I've experienced myself go from like 0 to 60 in a minute, in a second, just into a big reaction. And there it is. So this is what can happen. And then we can judge ourselves for that. But it's really helpful to understand that this is all our conditioning. This is our wounding, our conditioning, an actual imbalance and dysregulation in our nervous system because of that. There's not a me here that's responsible for all this and is bad because they can't keep it together, you know. So it brings in more self-compassion to really understand that this is really nervous system, you know, and blocked also emotional experience that hasn't been fully allowed, and it's a gift to have it triggered, hopefully in a relationship that's safe enough to be with it, you know. And if we bring in some awakened consciousness, then that increases it exponentially, our capacity to be able to actually be with it, heal it, and find some deeper wisdom on how to, you know, flow with this and be together. So, you know, it's helpful to take the self-judgment out of it and see that we can't, there's no me there that's supposed to be, you know, controlling this.
Yeah.
But there's also some self-responsibility. It's true, we can't change another person. We can't, you know, make them be a certain way with their experience. That it's, you know, we always have to just come back to ourselves. If it gets triggered in us, it belongs to us. Even if they triggered it, but how we responded to that in ourselves belongs to us, you know, and we need to be with it. But if the other person is not taking any responsibility, not willing, you know, to look at what's being triggered in them, choosing to remain unconscious, not interested in awakening and so on, well then, yes, they will just continue to be a source of triggers. It'd be up to us to be with that. And then we have to see if that relationship's serving us or not. You know, that as we be with it with ourselves, we can touch into a deeper wisdom that might be telling us that that's not the best place, that's not the safest place to you know, be in relationship.
Yeah, that if the relationship is safe enough, what are the signs? What does it feel like that this description of as safe enough? What is it that the partners, you know, I can imagine where you're not getting rejudged or reshamed. That would be a part of the container of it's being safe enough.
Well, to me, what makes a relationship safe is awakened awareness, awakened consciousness. That is what makes, the more there is of that, the more conscious, the more awakeness, the safer it is. And you referred in the beginning to like moving beyond conscious relationship. You know, conscious relationship has been a term that's been around at least 20 years. So most people are familiar with that. And that has to do with being more aware of our patterns, our conditioned patterns, our beliefs, you know, that get in the way of relationship, that cause conflict and reactivity. And we explore those and we become more aware of them and we take responsibility for them when they come up. That's having a conscious relationship. And that's been very helpful to have that in the world for the past few decades. And what I'm attempting to do is move that to the next level, because we can be in a conscious relationship without awakened awareness, you know, without being awake to our non-dual being. We can still be aware of our patterns and mindful and take responsibility. But when we have direct access to awakeness itself and we're being with that together with all of this, then that takes it to a whole other level. And it takes it to a whole other level of possibility and responsibility. And I believe that we're ready for that. I believe that the time has come in the human evolution to move relationship to that next level. It's time, and it's actually necessary at this point. Living in separation and duality is literally start throwing the planet in so much imbalance at this point that it's literally threatening its survival. So I think that indicates that it's time to move beyond separation and duality into a more awakened relating that includes the truth that we're all one being. It's not like doing something different. It's just including the whole picture. You know, what's actually true here? Are we two separate entities trying to relate, or are we actually one being? And how can we take that understanding, first of all, find it in ourselves, and second of all, take that into relationship where we're not fighting or at any kinds of odds or separation with another, and looking to another as our source of love, and seeing that we are actually the source of love ourselves. And that changes relationship completely and takes it to a whole other level than where it's been a conscious relationship.
Yeah, it makes the intention of what relationship is and is for what we, in a way, quote unquote, want out of it in our lives. It changes that completely, is what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Mm-hmm.
conscious relationship, maybe the intention is so that the relationship works, so that I can feel happy. And it's not that that's not true. We want a relationship that's functioning on a relational level. Of course, yes, happiness is our nature and what we want to feel, but the intention isn't so that the relationship just functions, but that there's this huge change, and that the relationship, this deep, deep intention, is for our awakening. And
yes, then it becomes a potent,
yeah,
very powerful force for healing, transformation, and awakening.
Yeah, and seeing relationship as that's being the point of it.
Excuse me?
Go ahead, keep going, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the relationship itself becomes a force for transformation and awakening. You know, that especially if that's the deepest intention, then the relationship is used as an assistance to deepen awakening and healing. And there's nothing really more powerful than that. But the close relationship, whether it's a romantic one or other kinds of close relationships, that's if we can bring that together in awakeness, that's a very powerful healing force.
Yeah, beautiful. I want to open it up to everyone else right now, and feel if there's any questions from all of you. Any of this is sparking. And if you can't find the raise hand button, that's getting too confusing, then just go ahead and unmute yourself. Just kind of, I'm feeling everyone kind of settling, digesting what we're what we're saying. And if you're on the phone, you can unmute yourself as well. I can feel someone out there wanting to just feel them. Come on, you can do it. Jump in.
Some questions.
There we go. If it's you and you know it's you. Okay, here we go. Judith, hi.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Lynn Marie.
Hi, Judith.
I was just feeling it would help to ground the discussion in some very concrete example of something that's arisen in your relationship, maybe recently, where, and to describe what actually was the experience on the body level and how it got worked through, because sometimes this can feel really abstract.
Mm-hmm.
So is that a possibility, or?
Sure. Yeah, we've touched on that a little bit, but not giving, specific examples yet. So I guess I can speak from my own experience, because I'm still working with this. I think we all are. In my book, I interview a number of spiritual teachers, including my own, Adyashanti and Rupert Spera, and other people and clients of mine and so on. And no one has this all together. I think this is still, something. Yeah,
nice to hear.
So not to get into judgment that, I still go into all this reactivity in relationship and I should be more awake. We're all working with this. This is a real edge in our evolution as human beings to even find this awakeness, let alone bring it into relationship, which I said is desperately needed on our planet, not just in our personal lives. So yeah, I'm always still working with this, and in my relationship, which is almost 30 years, 28 years. And we have both a commitment to this awakening, which helps a lot. But we also have, a fair amount of relational wounding. We've also healed a lot, but, it still comes up. And if I think of a recent time, it's more of like a certain kind of, we each have certain kind of triggers, a defensiveness, or we just go into a certain perception that's not even accurate to here and now. And what happens is, because of the commitment, one or both of us will stop at some point. We either stop it right away, or if we go with it for a while. Like just yesterday, now I'm remembering, something happened where my husband John went into a reactivity, feeling like he was being criticized, which is a trigger for him. And I was suggesting doing something a different way. And in that particular time, I wasn't even intending to criticize, but it was, sometimes I do, but it's, there was a reaction, and a defensive reaction. And it went on for a while. And then I said, where is your stillness right now? Because he had talked about feeling really deep levels of stillness in his life lately, doing a lot of meditation. I said, where is the stillness now? Is what I said to him. Mm-hmm. It just stopped him in his tracks. Mm-hmm. He just stopped. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're right. And then he was calmed down enough for me to explain that I was just trying to suggest a different way of doing something. I wasn't trying to criticize him. Then he could hear that. And he just dropped it, because it brought him back to his commitment. It brought him back to what's most important in him. And in that particular example, I didn't go full on into my own reaction back, which may have been different. If that happened, then it's just a matter of who's going to wake up out of that first. Who's going to come back to, wait a minute, let's take a look at what's happening here first. But in that case, that's how it happened, just saying, where's your stillness now? And then he just dropped it.
What's interesting,
so it has to do with commitment. It really has to do a lot with commitment.
Listening to you describe that is bringing up tears in me. It's like there's something, I don't know what that is. I've been feeling this regularly these last few days, just something about the capacity of the larger consciousness to be in charge more. Mm-hmm. And it's touching something really deep in my heart.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's so important, Judith. Like the letting the larger consciousness be in charge. That's really what it's about. Yeah. And it's in charge of the healing. It's in charge of the coming back. It's what's doing everything. There really isn't some separate entity here that's in charge of all of this.
Yeah, and it feels like the very the way the relationship is moving it's a continual surrender. Mm-hmm. To trusting. Actually, would you say something about the trusting in life and what is it like if that isn't there? How to deal with that sense of that there's a question about what to trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a huge one. Thank you for bringing that up. And that's been an edge for me, learning how to deeply trust life, to not keep turning to another person for resolution or my mind, to trust something deeper that connects us both, connects us all, and that doesn't even speak to me, that's silent, but it's a deep presence, and learning to trust that through repeated experiences of that, on a daily basis, feeling that presence, resting in that presence, getting to know that presence, learning to rely on that presence, which we're going to talk about more later, is huge, because otherwise, what are we trusting? When things get difficult and conflict happens and disruption in relationship, what do you turn to? I mean, it's good for each of you to take a look at that. You turn to some kind of conditioned knowledge or method or other person or each other, and it tends to go out, right? Instead of resting here in a silent presence that's infinite wisdom and letting that inform what we do. Even if we just go there first, even for a couple of seconds, pause, by going there and trusting that there's a greater wisdom that knows how to be with this. And our conditioned mind is so incredibly limited, it even can't even begin to heal and transform what we're dealing with.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Judith.
Mm-hmm.
Bradley.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
I wanted to ask, Lynn, if you might be able to comment based on some of the interviews that you've done with others, sort of the role that sort of let's call it a devotion to awakeness, right? A devotion to this movement of consciousness, that when we are blessed enough to find ourselves in awakened relationship, where the experience of being is very engaged in sort of sharing itself, and how that sort of manifests for some of these couples who find themselves out in the world, being of service together, teaching together, sharing together, and being this awakeness together.
Oh, you're referring to people I interviewed that are couples who are sharing this in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a few of them. I mean, in a way, Adyashanti and his wife Mukti are sharing, but not usually together. They teach separately, but they're out in the world sharing. And same with Rupert Spira and his wife Ellen Emmett. They generally don't teach together. But there's a couple that I interviewed in my book, Margot King and John Steiner, who work together in what I call awakened activism. They do a lot of activist work together out in the world. And what was your question about that? How do they do that together?
Yeah, just sort of the role of devotion. Maybe I'm not doing the question justice. But the devotional quality, you talked about commitment, right? Commitment to using the relationship sort of awakeness. And I think I'm sort of pointing at, in the context of something larger even than that, I guess, where the relationship itself is awake.
Right.
Both
right.
partners are dwelling and abiding in that.
Right.
And it's this moving spirit.
Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the fruition of awakened relating, is moving it beyond the relationship. That's what you're talking about. Moving it beyond the relationship into a greater devotion, not just to each other, but to bringing this to the world, right? And so that is the last chapter in my book, which is about bringing this awakened consciousness to heal our world. And that's where Margot and John are interviewed regarding bringing it in through activism, and Mukti and Adya are interviewed in bringing it out through their teachings in that last chapter. So that is the evolution of what I'm talking about, is to go bigger than the relationship and bring that, because you're not then needing each other in the same way, It's like you get to share this awakeness, and there's just a natural overflowing out into the world in your own way. In your own way. There's a way in which my book, and I say it in the last paragraph, is an overflowing of the experience of my relationship, an offering from there, from the heart of that. It was an offering from that then became a book that then will reach more than our relationship.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful. So it becomes about supporting each other's service, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. There's a natural movement of serving the whole that's inherent in all of us. And the more we're identified as the separate ego self, the more self-concerned we are, the more we're reaching towards others to try to get something from them, and I'm going to get my love from you and my safety and my security. And if you do anything that threatens that, I'm going to attack you because you're the source of my security and love. I mean, you can see how this just does not work, right? It just does not work to try to be in relationship as two separate ego identities. It is just like problematic all the time. So then if we start to bring more of this understanding of our unified nature into it, it changes it. It frees us from that constant striving to try to get something from somebody else. If we see that we have the love we're seeking is inherent in our own being, I mean, that right there, you can see how much that changes things. And that's something that I am challenging, because that seeking love outside ourselves is something that generally hasn't even been questioned, right? We just like, I'm looking for love, or I found love in this other person. It's just like how we see things. And now I'm questioning that. Wait a minute, the source of love is not outside ourselves. And when we externalize that, immediately there's trouble.
Yeah, I found love as if I didn't already have it.
That's right. And I have to get love from you. And if you don't give it to me in any particular moment, I'm going to be really upset, And
also I can lose it. So there's an inherent insecurity there when you do have it from that perspective. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Serena, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, Lynn Marie. It's good to see you. First, I want to say how grateful I am for this coming together of all of us, and Lynn Marie sharing. Yeah. And the thing that I don't even know that I have a question, but just feel to share this, because there's on this call that do not have a partner right now. And for me, what I've needed to do, because I've had, and I'm still working through like immense trauma, I've needed like a whole team of support. So I've gathered around me people who are not only on this journey, but doing it from the same path that I'm doing it on, that we're available to one another at any time to pull out of that insanity that we go into. This morning I just joined with someone, and within minutes then, because there's that commitment to awakening. And Bradley mentioned devotion, and now it feels like that is the only thing that's important in my life. This is it. And when I experience that love that Lynn Marie is talking about, I don't even experience that I have it. I experience it that I am it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's beyond my body. It's beyond body. And I just feel so grateful for all the support I've been given and the work with Lynn Marie. Again, being a single person in the world, for me, required really reaching out and making a team to support me in awakening and healing. Because it's a very challenging thing, because I want to go in and be the doer of it, and to kind of find that balance in it all. So thank you. That's it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Serena, because it's true that you don't have to have an intimate partner. I'm just referring to what comes up in that kind of relationship. But we're all in relationship all the time, and and these things are going to come up. If we don't have a partner, they're going to come up with our friends or our boss or our family or somebody, right? There's always somebody in our life that this comes up with, then we work with it in the same way I've been talking about with a partner. Then we get the people we're friends with, we get an agreement, we be conscious together, get a whole team like Serena's talking about, of people, especially if we're working with trauma. It requires a lot of support, and there's nothing wrong with getting a lot of support. And sometimes I work with couples who both have a lot of wounding, being triggered a lot, and it's not enough to just be in couples therapy. They may need also individual therapy, and maybe also some kind of somatic work, and like a whole team if they have the resources to do that. They need it.
Yeah, my thoughts are often my worst enemy. I mean, I do it to myself over and over.
As we all do.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is such a good point, Serena. I know in my own life, I can't see myself in another partnership without a whole team consistently. That even to what I've learned from my relationships too is to take the almost the burden off of there's kind of this heaviness like on just having one partner. And if we're constantly re-stimulating each other, if we're at that level, if I'm still at that level, to really be moving all of that energy, once there's a trigger, moving that to my support team and still maintaining a team so that there isn't this kind of heavy responsibility on the relationship or the partner to be the one, to be the main support for me, because they need to be the main support for themselves.
That's right. Good point. Yeah. We don't want to put the burden of that entirely on the partner. It's primarily on ourselves and getting support that we need ourselves to take care of it within ourselves.
The one thing I did in my pulling together a support team, people who were in agreement, we actually have a time we meet every week on Zoom to kind of process anything that might come up. So, because it's easy for me to delude myself into thinking I'm doing okay. Mm-hmm. And so by having these other women on this call and sharing, I can see what I might be missing too. So that's been helpful to have that regular coming together. And doing it on Zoom is so great because we don't have to figure out how to get together anywhere. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Thanks, Serena. Well, it's 11 exactly right now. Is it a good time to take a 5-minute break, everyone? Get some water, stretch your legs, and then we'll come back together in 5 minutes and go through this kind of guided experiential thing you've got for us.
Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Back from break. See, a lot of people still have cameras off, so maybe we'll let everyone just come back and get settled. I got some more tea. All right, Lynn Marie. Let me get you, hold on one second, let me get you pinned up here and turn the recording back on.